They fired me for being obsolete after 20 years, now I own their biggest competitor. The air in the sterile conference room hung heavy, thick with the silent tension that seemed to press against the very walls. It was a stark, almost suffocating contrast to the tempest that had long been brewing in Dax's eyes, now unleashed as he delivered his pronouncement. "Theron," he began, his voice surprisingly soft, yet imbued with an almost theatrical pity, a feigned regret that did not quite reach his lips, "we've decided to move in a new direction. Your experience, while historically valuable, is, well, it's become obsolete." He leaned back further into the plush, ergonomic contours of his chair, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his face. It was the look of a man who believed he had just discovered fire and was patiently, condescendingly, explaining its properties to a caveman who could only stare in bewildered awe. Theron simply met his gaze, his own expression an unreadable mask, a tranquil surface above a deep, churning current. Dax continued, oblivious to the quiet storm that had not just brewed, but had long since found its calm center within Theron. "Our data clearly shows that legacy system architects, no matter how seasoned, are a bottleneck. We're integrating cutting-edge AI, streamlining processes, and frankly, we need agile, forward-thinking talent, not custodians of the past." He gestured vaguely towards the wall, where a vibrant, dynamic presentation shimmered, filled with charts that promised exponential growth and ruthless efficiency. The irony of his words was not lost on Theron. For 20 years, he had been the silent architect of their digital backbone, the unseen hand that ensured the company's complex systems hummed along, resilient against the daily wear and tear of a rapidly evolving tech landscape. His knowledge wasn't just about code, it was about the intricate, often illogical, interdependencies that formed the very foundation of their multi-billion-dollar enterprise. It was the institutional memory embodied in a living, breathing problem solver, a human repository of 1,000 forgotten fixes and elegant workarounds. And now, he was obsolete. Dax paused, a subtle shift in his posture, clearly expecting a reaction, perhaps an outburst of anger, a desperate plea for reconsideration, a show of vulnerability. He got neither. Theron's silence, he knew, must have been unsettling for the younger executive. Dax thrived on conflict, on the dramatic declaration of his superiority, on the crushing of lesser wills. But Theron offered him no such satisfaction. Instead, a peculiar sense of calm settled over him, a quiet knowing that was almost serene. He had seen this coming, not with bitterness or resentment, but with the dispassionate clarity of a chess grandmaster anticipating an opponent's predictable, yet ultimately flawed, move. Dax had just played his king, thinking he was checkmating Theron. What he didn't realize was that Theron had already moved his queen into a position he was far too myopic to foresee, a move that would redefine the entire game. He understood, Theron said, his voice even, devoid of any discernible emotion. The words hung in the sterile air, a stark contrast to the expected indignation, the frustrated outburst, the plea for mercy. Dax's brow furrowed slightly. Theron's lack of protest was clearly throwing him off balance, disrupting his carefully constructed narrative of triumph. "And his severance package?" Theron inquired, shifting the topic with a deliberate, almost casual air, as if discussing a routine business transaction. Dax stammered, caught completely off guard, fumbling with a tablet to pull up the details. He had expected a battle, a theatrical confrontation, not this detached, almost dismissive, negotiation. His dismissive wave, the glib use of obsolete, it was all part of his performance. But Theron wasn't playing his game. Not anymore. As Dax rattled off the terms, his mind was already racing, not dwelling on the past, but meticulously sketching the contours of a future Dax couldn't even begin to imagine. The quiet hum of the room seemed to amplify the ticking clock, not just for Theron's departure, but for the dramatic reordering of the industry itself, a reordering Theron now knew he would have a crucial hand in shaping. Dax had called him obsolete, but what he had truly done was unleash him. His journey to that sterile conference room, to that pronouncement of his obsolescence, spanned 2 decades of unwavering dedication, a quiet, almost monastic devotion to the intricate dance of data and logic. He had joined the company straight out of his master's program, a young man brimming with a quiet passion for systems, for understanding how disparate parts could be made to sing in harmony. His aptitude for understanding complex systems, for seeing not just the lines of code but the underlying business processes they served, quickly became apparent. While others chased the fleeting glamour of front-end development or the latest buzzwords, he gravitated towards the legacy systems, the foundational, often messy, but absolutely critical infrastructure that kept the company running. He saw a profound beauty in their enduring resilience, a challenge in their intricate complexities. He delved into the archaic languages, the convoluted architectures, the undocumented quirks that were the digital equivalent of ancient runes, each layer revealing a deeper history, a forgotten design philosophy. He became the company's institutional memory, the one person who could untangle a decade-old bug in a system no one else understood, or seamlessly integrate a new API with a core module written when the internet was still finding its feet, a relic from a time before ubiquitous broadband. He didn't seek the spotlight. His satisfaction came from solving intractable problems, from the quiet hum of a system running flawlessly because of his interventions. He found a deep, almost meditative contentment in the successful deployment of a complex patch, in the smooth, unblinking operation of a critical database. He worked late nights, weekends, sacrificing personal milestones, a missed birthday dinner here, a postponed vacation there, for project deadlines, driven by an internal compass that always pointed towards systemic integrity. He saw colleagues come and go, chasing promotions, burning out in the relentless churn of corporate ambition, or simply seeking new challenges. But he remained, a constant, steadily climbing the ranks to principal software architect, his value implicit in the stability and reliability of the company's operations. He was the silent guardian, the one who prevented the digital house of cards from collapsing, often averting crises no one outside his small circle would ever know about. There was the time, for instance, when a critical payment gateway, built in the early 2000s, threatened to buckle under an unexpected surge of traffic. While others panicked, Theron, working through the night, meticulously traced the bottleneck, identified a long-forgotten configuration setting, and implemented a fix that allowed the system to scale, saving the company millions in potential losses and reputational damage. His quiet triumph was a simple nod from his then-director, a quiet recognition that resonated deeper than any public accolade. The shift began subtly, a slow erosion of the respect once afforded to deep, long-term expertise. It coincided with the ascent of individuals like Dax. Dax arrived like a whirlwind, a wunderkind with a freshly minted MBA and a philosophy forged in the crucible of aggressive disruption. He was charismatic, articulate, and utterly devoid of patience for anything that couldn't be quantified, optimized, or automated into oblivion. He championed innovation with a zeal that bordered on religious fervor, believing that any process over 5 years old was inherently inefficient, any expert over 40 was inherently resistant to change. His mantra was "move fast and break things," a philosophy that sent shivers down Theron's spine, for he knew that breaking things in a multi-billion-dollar enterprise could lead to catastrophic collapses. Their interactions were always polite, yet laced with an unspoken tension, like two opposing magnetic poles held just barely apart. Dax saw Theron's methodical approach, his insistence on understanding the foundational complexities, as a weakness, a relic of a bygone era. Theron, he'd say during a strategy meeting, his tone patronizingly patient, as if explaining basic arithmetic to a slow child, "We need to sunset these legacy platforms, aggressively. The market demands speed, agility. We can't be held hostage by archaic code. It's an unsustainable cost center." Theron would calmly explain the intricate dependencies, the potential for catastrophic data loss, the sheer cost and risk of ripping out and replacing systems that, while old, were incredibly robust and performed critical, often niche, functions no shiny new platform could replicate without years of bespoke development. He would detail the hidden costs of migration, the unexpected integration challenges, the potential for client churn. Dax would nod, a polite smile plastered on his face, but his eyes would betray his impatience, his mind clearly already racing to the next buzzword. He simply couldn't grasp the value of what wasn't shiny and new. He saw only the cost of maintenance, not the immense value of resilience, historical data integrity, and the deep trust built with clients over decades. He saw the company's roots as chains, not as anchors. It was during these frustrating exchanges that Theron began to cultivate what would become his secret weapon. His detailed understanding of their core infrastructure didn't just reveal its vulnerabilities, it also highlighted the incredibly specific, often overlooked, niche problems it solved for their clients. These weren't mainstream, high-glamour problems, they were the messy, complex, industry-specific challenges that bigger, flashier solutions often ignored because they weren't scalable enough for mass appeal, or simply too intricate to bother with for a generalist solution. He saw the gaps, not just in their current offerings, but in the entire industry's approach. He saw how DAX's aggressive modernization drive, while potentially solving some broad issues and appealing to a certain segment of the market, would inevitably create new, acute pain points for a significant segment of their customer base, especially those with specialized data requirements or existing, complex integrations. He started quietly cataloging these overlooked niches. He dedicated lunch breaks and evenings to meticulous research, not just within their company's documentation, but across industry forums, technical papers, and obscure mailing lists. He networked outside the company, discreetly reaching out to former colleagues who had left to join smaller, specialized firms, or who had retired but still maintained deep industry connections. One such connection was Michael, a brilliant data architect who had departed the company 3 years prior, frustrated by the creeping bureaucracy and a nascent sense of short-sightedness in the management. Michael, now running a successful, albeit small, consultancy, confirmed many of Theron's suspicions about the gaps in the market. Theron also attended obscure technical conferences, not for the keynote speeches by industry giants, but for the breakout sessions on niche protocols and bespoke data exchange formats, where the real, gritty problems were discussed by those on the front lines. He cultivated a mental map, and increasingly, a digital one, of the entire industry's underbelly, the specific pain points that large, generalist tech solutions consistently failed to address because they were too focused on the next big, shiny trend. This wasn't about competitive intelligence in the traditional sense, it was about understanding the true, granular needs of the market, needs that were often obscured by the hype of new technologies and the pervasive belief that new inherently meant better. He wasn't just observing the company's trajectory, he was charting the precise coordinates of the market opportunities it would inevitably abandon. His secret weapon wasn't a piece of software, it was a profound, almost prophetic, understanding of market gaps and the deep network of individuals who shared similar insights and frustrations. He prepared it not out of malice or a desire for revenge, but out of a quiet professional foresight, a deep conviction that true value lay not in the shiny new, but in the robust, the reliable, and the truly useful. And he knew, with a certainty that chilled him, that Dax was building a house on sand, unaware of the quicksand beneath. The moment Dax delivered his verdict, a strange sense of liberation washed over Theron. It wasn't the panic Dax might have expected, but the quiet satisfaction of a meticulously laid plan finally being set into motion. The severance package was generous, more than enough to provide a comfortable buffer, allowing him to breathe and plan without immediate financial pressure. His first calls weren't to lawyers or recruiters, but to a handful of individuals he had cultivated over the years, former colleagues, industry veterans, and even some frustrated clients he had discreetly helped navigate his old company's increasingly convoluted new systems. They let him go, Theron stated simply to Michael, the brilliant data architect who had left their former company 2 years prior, disillusioned by the new management's short-sightedness. They called him obsolete. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, a silence that spoke volumes. Theron, that's insane. You were the bedrock of that place. Perhaps, Theron mused, a faint smile touching his lips, a rare expression for him. Or perhaps it was simply time for a new foundation elsewhere. He had been thinking, Michael, about those persistent issues with cross-platform data integrity for legacy ERP systems. Remember how they used to patch them together for clients A and B? DAX's new universal integration layer is only going to exacerbate those problems, not solve them. It's a general solution applied to highly specific, deeply embedded challenges. Michael understood immediately. He, like Theron, saw the chasm growing between the industry's relentless push for generalized, AI-driven solutions and the bespoke, complex needs of real-world enterprises. Michael had already established a small, successful consultancy firm that specialized in niche data migrations, often picking up the pieces when larger, flashier projects failed. He was Theron's first key piece, possessing the operational know-how and a small, agile team already accustomed to intricate, messy problems. His next step was to secure initial funding, but not through traditional venture capital, which would demand aggressive growth projections and a focus on broad market appeal. His idea was too niche, too specialized for their typical appetite, which sought the next unicorn, the next billion-dollar valuation. Instead, he leveraged his personal savings, which were substantial due to years of disciplined living and a surprising lack of interest in extravagant spending. His quiet focus on work had precluded most materialistic desires. He also reached out to an old mentor, Sarah, a retired tech executive who had always seen the value in foundational systems and long-term relationships, a rare breed in a field obsessed with the ephemeral. She had always preached that true innovation often lay in perfecting the overlooked, not just in building the new. She listened patiently as Theron articulated his vision, a company that didn't aim to replace existing systems entirely, but to provide highly specialized, secure, and robust interoperability solutions for complex legacy environments, focusing on the very pain points that Dax's company, in its aggressive pursuit of the new, was actively creating. Sarah didn't offer him an investment in the traditional sense, understanding the unique nature of his endeavor. Instead, she offered something far more valuable, her network of high-net-worth individuals, many of whom were executives in older, established industries, manufacturing, logistics, finance, who understood the pain of digital transformation gone wrong, who had themselves been burned by flashy, over-promised solutions. Through her introductions, Theron secured several quiet angel investments from individuals who recognized the market need he was targeting, not a massive, disruptive market, but a lucrative, underserved one, filled with desperate clients. They were less interested in a quick flip and more in a reliable, niche solution that would solve their persistent, costly problems. He named his new venture Nexus Solutions. Nexus, because its purpose was to connect disparate systems, to be the crucial link, the connective tissue that made everything work together seamlessly. Solutions, because that was precisely what they offered, tangible, effective answers to complex problems, not just vaporware. His initial team was lean, deliberately so. Michael brought his small group of highly skilled engineers, and Theron quietly poached a few former colleagues who, like him, had been marginalized or felt stifled by the new regime at his old company. They were the obsolete, the ones with the deep, granular knowledge that Dax had discarded, now reformed into an elite unit. They set up a small, unassuming office, intentionally avoiding the flashy, open-plan layouts favored by startups, the ping-pong tables and free kombucha. Their focus was on substance, not superficiality, on quiet, meticulous work. While Nexus Solutions slowly, methodically built its foundational capabilities, Dax's company continued its relentless march towards modernization. Theron heard whispers through his network, like ripples on a pond, a new, ambitious CRM rollout that was failing to integrate with crucial customer history databases, leading to frustrated sales teams and lost leads, a migration to a cloud-based ERP system that was causing unexpected data integrity issues for their largest clients, creating invoicing nightmares and supply chain disruptions, and, most critically, a significant loss of institutional knowledge as more experienced staff, like Theron, were either let go or chose to leave, taking their invaluable expertise with them. Dax, from what he heard, was unfazed. He dismissed these as teething pains of innovation, attributing any setbacks to resistance to change from within or without, to the stubbornness of the old guard. His public pronouncements remained confident, almost messianic, painting himself as the brave pioneer. He even publicly stated in an industry interview that the old guard simply couldn't keep up with the pace of true innovation, preferring the comfort of stagnation. He saw Theron's silence as resignation, his disappearance from the corporate scene as proof of his irrelevance. It only fueled his arrogance, blinding him to the quiet revolution brewing just beneath the surface, in the very gaps he was creating. Dax was tearing down the old mansion without understanding the foundational engineering, and Theron was quietly building a robust new structure in the very spaces he was unwittingly creating. The time for the reveal arrived with the annual Global Tech Summit, an event DAX's company always dominated with splashy announcements and impressive keynotes. This year, their CEO was scheduled to deliver the opening address, followed by DAX himself, who was to unveil their AI-driven ecosystem for the future. Theron had secured a booth, a modest one, tucked away in a less prominent hall, alongside other specialized tech providers. He wasn't there to make a grand splash, but to conduct targeted meetings and, more importantly, to observe. He needed to feel the pulse of the industry, to confirm his theories about its direction, and to witness DAX's performance firsthand. DAX's presentation was exactly as Theron predicted, full of buzzwords, impressive graphics, and vague promises of a completely reimagined digital landscape. He spoke of disrupting traditional models and liberating enterprises from legacy shackles. He even, subtly, took a jab at the slower, more cautious approaches that prioritize stability over agility, clearly referencing the very philosophy Theron championed, the very principles he had embodied for 2 decades. DAX glowed under the spotlight, soaking in the applause from a crowd eager to believe in the next big thing. Theron watched from the back of the hall, a placid smile on his face, his hands clasped loosely behind his back. There was no anger, only a quiet confirmation of what he already knew. Later that afternoon, a smaller, more specialized session was scheduled, focusing on niche interoperability challenges in enterprise systems. It was a dry topic, one that would attract only a highly specific audience: the technical architects, the operations managers, the IT directors who dealt with the messy realities of technology. Theron was listed as a guest speaker. His slot was right after a panel discussion that featured, ironically, a mid-level manager from his old company, a man named Brian, who was struggling visibly to articulate how their new systems would handle complex B2B data exchanges, resorting to corporate jargon and platitudes that offered no real answers. Theron watched Brian, recognizing the genuine struggle, the man's frustration with an inadequate solution, and felt a pang of empathy. Brian was a good man, caught in DAX's ill-conceived web. When it was Theron's turn, he walked onto the small stage, his presence unassuming, his demeanor calm and collected. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice clear and steady, filling the intimate space. His name was Theron, and he was the CEO of Nexus Solutions. For the past year, they had been quietly working on addressing some of the most persistent, yet often overlooked, challenges in enterprise technology. He paused, letting his words sink in, allowing the weight of his understated introduction to settle. While the industry is rightly focused on the next big leap, on AI and quantum computing, on the promises of a fully automated future, Nexus Solutions has focused on the critical foundation. They bridge the gap between robust legacy infrastructure and the demands of modern data flow, ensuring seamless, secure, and reliable interoperability for businesses that cannot afford to rip and replace their entire digital nervous system, who value continuity and stability over fleeting trends. He then presented a case study. Not a hypothetical one, spun from marketing theory, but a real-world project they had just completed, meticulously documented and verifiable. Just last month, he continued, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in his tone, a quiet power emerging. Nexus Solutions successfully completed a major integration project for Global Holdings. For years, Global Holdings struggled with their outdated ERP systems' inability to communicate efficiently with their newly adopted cloud-based CRM. Their previous vendors, including his former employer, had offered complex, expensive, and ultimately unreliable universal solutions that simply added more layers of complexity without solving the fundamental problem. Nexus Solutions, however, took a different approach. They identified the precise data protocols, the specific security requirements, and the unique business logic embedded within their decades-old system, understanding its intricacies as if it were their own. He clicked to the next slide. It showed a complex diagram, but unlike DAX's flashy, abstract graphics, this was a detailed, architectural blueprint, clear and precise, demonstrating an intimate understanding of the problem. Using their proprietary Nexus framework, they delivered a bespoke middleware solution that not only achieved seamless, real-time data synchronization between their ERP and CRM, but also enhanced their data integrity and audit trails, providing a level of reliability previously thought impossible. The project was delivered on time, under budget, and resulted in a staggering 30% increase in operational efficiency for global holdings sales and logistics departments, a tangible, measurable impact. Then came the quiet bombshell, delivered with the same calm, factual tone, allowing the weight of the statement to land without embellishment. In fact, he stated, his eyes scanning the room, meeting the gaze of several industry veterans, the success of this project was so profound that Global Holdings has just signed an exclusive 3-year contract with Nexus Solutions, naming them their preferred vendor for all future complex system integrations. Global Holdings was not just any client, it was one of his old company's largest and most prestigious, a client that Dax had been personally courting for months, trying to persuade them to transition fully to his new AI-driven ecosystem. It was a cornerstone client, a symbol of stability for his former employer. He saw him then. Dax. He was standing at the back of the room, near the exit, having evidently wandered in, perhaps out of boredom or a casual curiosity about the niche session he deemed irrelevant. His usual self-assured smirk had vanished, replaced by an expression of utter disbelief, followed by a flush of angry red that crept up his neck, darkening his complexion. He looked like a man who had just walked into a wall he didn't know existed, a wall of his own making. His eyes, wide with shock, locked onto Theron's. He opened his mouth, as if to speak, as if to issue a protest or a denial, but no sound came out. The room, which had been quietly attentive, now had a palpable ripple of murmurs, a rising hum of realization. The gravity of what Theron had just announced, the direct challenge to Dax's company's strategy and, more importantly, to his personal narrative of progress and disruption, was not lost on anyone. Theron had not gloated, he had not attacked Dax directly. He had simply presented a fact, a success story, that simultaneously exposed the glaring weakness in Dax's own innovative approach. The silence that followed Theron's announcement was not empty, it was filled with the deafening sound of a paradigm shifting, the quiet reverberation of a truth long ignored finally coming to light. The immediate aftermath of Theron's announcement at the Global Tech Summit was a whirlwind, though he remained a calm observer at its center, a silent eye in the storm. The news about Global Holdings and Nexus Solutions spread like wildfire through the conference halls, then through the industry itself, amplified by the stunned silence of Dax and the implications of the announcement. The ripple effect was swift and brutal for his former employer. Within hours, their stock, which had been riding high on Dax's innovation rhetoric and overinflated promises, began to plummet. Analysts, who had been seduced by the promise of AI and radical change without understanding the underlying complexities, suddenly started asking pointed, uncomfortable questions about the company's ability to handle complex, real-world enterprise needs. The very foundations Dax had declared obsolete were now being revealed as critical vulnerabilities, the gaps he created now exposed as gaping chasms. He heard the frantic whispers, the desperate phone calls echoing through the industry grapevine. Major clients, seeing Global Holdings' decisive move to Nexus Solutions, began to express deep concerns about their own ongoing migrations with his old company. Some initiated immediate reviews of their contracts, others openly hinted at re-evaluating their partnerships and seeking alternative solutions. The internal chaos at his former company must have been immense. Dax, Theron later learned through his extensive network, was publicly humiliated. His confident pronouncements at the summit were suddenly seen as hollow, arrogant boasts in the face of tangible, undeniable results from a company he had dismissed entirely, a company led by a man he had called obsolete. He was grilled by the board, challenged by senior leadership, his carefully cultivated image as the visionary disruptor crumbling into dust. His perceived genius evaporated under the harsh light of reality. Former colleagues, those who had seen his silent struggles and quiet dedication, reached out. Some offered apologies for not seeing the truth sooner, others expressed quiet admiration. "You always knew, Theron," one former peer, a project manager who had often clashed with Dax's unrealistic timelines and superficial metrics, confided in a hushed tone during a discreet phone call. "You always understood what really mattered, the deep truth of it all." It wasn't gloating for Theron, not truly. It was a confirmation of a truth he had always held, that fundamental understanding, built over years of quiet dedication, holds an intrinsic value that can't simply be discarded in favor of unproven, flashy solutions. He felt no satisfaction in their suffering, only the quiet validation of his predictions and the profound sense that justice, in its own slow, methodical way, had been served. The industry was finally seeing what he had seen all along, that tearing down foundations without understanding their purpose only leads to collapse, and that true progress is built on solidity, not just speed. Months turned into a year. Nexus Solutions flourished, not with explosive, uncontrolled growth, but with a steady, sustainable expansion built on proven success and an impeccable reputation. Their initial triumph with global holdings became the bedrock for securing more contracts with equally complex, established enterprises, companies that valued reliability and precision over fleeting trends. They never sought to be the biggest, but they quickly became the undisputed leader in their specialized niche, the go-to experts for complex interoperability challenges. They attracted top talent engineers, architects, and project managers who, like Theron, valued deep expertise in methodical problem-solving over fleeting trends and corporate posturing. Many were former employees of his old company, disillusioned by DAX's chaotic leadership and the ensuing instability. Theron even quietly acquired a small, struggling software firm that owned some legacy intellectual property his former company desperately needed to complete one of DAX's stalled innovation projects, a critical piece of middleware that DAX had dismantled. The irony was exquisite. The obsolete technology Theron had always valued was now essential for the very company that had discarded him. DAX's fate was predictable, almost inevitable. His star, once so bright and ascendant, had irrevocably dimmed. He was eventually demoted, his once glorified innovation department restructured and placed under more seasoned, pragmatic leadership. The official line was that he was pursuing new entrepreneurial opportunities, a euphemism for a forced departure, but everyone in the industry knew the truth. His aggressive, short-sighted approach had created more problems than it solved, and his arrogance had blinded him to the true value of experience and foundational knowledge. His old company eventually recovered, but not before learning a harsh, expensive lesson. They began, slowly and painfully, to re-evaluate their strategy, recognizing that true progress often involves building upon existing strengths, not simply discarding them in a relentless pursuit of the new. Today, Theron oversees a thriving company built on the very principles DAX dismissed, a testament to the enduring power of deep knowledge. His days are filled with the kind of challenging, complex problem-solving that he truly enjoys, the quiet satisfaction of making intricate systems work harmoniously. There is a profound sense of peace in knowing that his quiet foresight, his encyclopedic knowledge, and his methodical approach were not just valuable, but essential. His journey had taught him a timeless lesson: true innovation is not merely about chasing the newest trend or discarding the old. It's about understanding the deep-rooted needs, respecting the foundational wisdom accumulated over decades, and seeing the unseen connections that others overlook in their rush to the next big thing. Experience, the kind that accumulates silently over years, is not a liability to be shed, it is an invaluable compass, guiding one through the volatile currents of change. It is the quiet strength that, when unleashed, can reshape industries and redefine what it means to be truly indispensable. If you enjoyed this story of quiet foresight triumphing over arrogant short-sightedness, be sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on similar tales of strategy and success. What did you think of Theron's journey? Do you believe experience is truly undervalued in today's fast-paced world? Share your thoughts in the comments below.